When was the last time you thought about how easy it is for you to step into the shower or walk up to the front porch? For millions of travelers, these simple tasks are not so simple.
There are accessories and things you can do to kind of move around that. But I would say, if you're going to put in towel bars, don't put in towel bars, put in grab bars that dual as towel racks, right? And I mean, if you're going to make that change anyways, it's not that much more.
Making a short-term rental property accessible isn't just the right thing to do. It could be the smartest investment that you could make.
You can say it's handicap friendly and have options for things that you don't have to have big installations or put a ton of money into that would really make a difference for people on their vacation.
The market for accessible short-term rentals is growing. So why are so many properties still impossible to navigate for people that have mobility issues and other special needs?
It's easier for a person to get in even on their own. That's something that people don't think about, but that's just hinging the door in a certain direction that would make it easier if you can't do these other things.
I'm 31-time Airbnb superhost Jason Muth. I worked in the media business for over 25 years, and in 2016, I started my Chapter 2 in the world of short-term rentals. Since then, I've welcomed over 5,000 guests and their furry friends to our properties. And now we are here to show you how to create a smart stay. Now, here's a conversation about accessibility in our short-term rentals. So, Rory, today we're talking about making properties accessible to people that have disabilities when they travel, because, this is a growing category of adults. Rory, you know my mother really well at this point, right? And you've certainly stayed in the sauna that is my childhood house because of her body temperature fluctuating so much. But, you and I see what it's like to operate short-term rental properties. We see what it's like for somebody in a wheelchair to have to get around their own home. And we're going to kind of merge those two topics with this episode. And this is something we have not talked about on the podcast yet. So we're excited to bring our guest on. But, Rory, these are considerations that all operators should be thinking about, right?
Yeah, and I have a lot of questions for today's guest. There are different ways that we can come at this question. One is just how do we make the world more inclusive for everybody and all of our guests? Also, what are the opportunities for short-term rental owners and operators to, if they make their properties more accessible? And then finally, for me, just with the legal background, I think with the apprehension and just the risk of liability once you declare that your place is handicap accessible. So those are different ways that we come at this topic. But in any event, I do have lots of questions for today's guest.
Yeah. Let's welcome Mrs. Schneider. She is the founder and inventor of Less Barriers. We'll talk about that product in a little bit. It's a movable wheelchair tray. But Mrs. Schneider, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for having me.
We were just talking off camera about, my mother who has had MS my entire life. Your husband has MS. Both those people, our loved ones, are in wheelchairs, and we see the struggles that it happens, when they travel, like, trying to find a place that has the right configuration of things, whether it's accessing a property, getting around a property, cleaning yourself in your property, preparing food and everything. And I'm guessing there's a lot of people listening to this that haven't thought about this if people with disabilities aren't super close to them. When you're appointing a short-term rental, a lot of times people are just like, they're in a whirlwind of, I now have a second home. Like, how am I going to pay for this home? Like, how am I going to design this home? And what I'll say, having been at this point, we're 31 times super host on Airbnb, and I'm pretty comfortable navigating my way around the Airbnb platform. There are filters where we as property owners or co-hosts can pick and choose things like the width of a door, or does the property have steps coming into it? Is the walkway lit? Is there a ramp going into the property? And there's others in there about accessibility. And if we're able to make our properties a little bit more accessible, it will actually diminish competition. And that if someone's searching for a property, such as you were just talking about, when you were traveling and there was only one property popping up, that's the one you're booking, right? So this, if you're listening to this episode saying, this isn't applicable to me, it is, because there are some small tweaks you might be able to make to your property that might help exclude a lot of other homes that are in your area. And you might be able to kind of cater to an audience of people that are searching for these types of properties. So With that, welcome to the Smart Stay Show. Thank you for taking the time to, explain to us what are some things that people who are hosts should be thinking about. Um, our first question is just that, like, when you're looking for a property for somewhere to travel, because people with disabilities travel, what are some of those kind of basic things that an owner can do or should have in their property that would make it welcome to you and to your husband?
I can tell you 1 or 2 things we went to that were good and a couple that were bad. So we went to a couple of campgrounds that said they were accessible. And the first thing we did when we got out of the van is we had to take his wheelchair through like 2 inches, 3 inches of sand to get to the front way, which did have a ramp onto the porch, but then it was like 2 or 3 inches from the porch into the actual cabin. And then the cabin didn't even have a bathroom. And then you had to go across the campground to get to a bathroom. And to my mind, that's not accessible at all. Um, and it wasn't a good time for my husband, and then it wasn't great for our kids. Um, I know when we went to Mackinac Island, there's the bike company there, and they had a handicap accessible hotel room with a roll and showers, the nicest um, like bathroom and room that we'd ever been to that said it was handicap accessible. But as far as, things that you can do, so I wrote up a paper and I'll have that on my website and it has all the details so people can choose what's right for them and what might not be right for them. I think that there's a lot of people who are trying to do, they've got a shoestring budget. What can you do with that? And I think one of the things I talked to you about was, I had a friend of mine, I was helping her put her back deck on and she was going to be putting on a new front porch. It was cracked, the foundation, it was all cement. And I said, it'd be way cheaper if you made that into a ramp up to into your house, than actually replace that out and have it be a two-step up. So that's a, there's an opportunity to actually make money by making that change. And then to have a niche where you are more competitive. Things on your doors. So don't have door knobs. Don't have faucets that have knobs. Have levers. Those are much easier to use. If you are building or having to remodel, there is 32-inch, which is a standard doorway, and there's 36. Do the 36. There are this different hardware that you can add to your existing doors that will give you an additional 2 inches of space. Right. And that's not having to replace the door jamb of the door or anything like that. There's also using door barns, right, within the interior of the house, which is a cheaper solution and very easily, accessible to people who have disabilities. Your
I should just jump in right there, like, some of the reasons why, like, we mentioned a barn door or a pocket door, the those are easier to slide, right? You don't have a door that you need to pull out and then somehow get into the room and then shut. You just slide it and then slide it shut, and then you lock it, and you have your privacy, right?
Yeah, and if you have, let's say you do some of these cheaper options and you have an existing the swing doors, which most people have, okay? The thing that's hard is that one of those directions, you're going to have to pull the door towards you while you wheel forward. Those are opposing motions. If you have to have that still in your house, in your rental properties or other areas, try to have where that's going to be the hard part of pulling towards you while you're trying to pull forward. Maybe have that be, let's say, outside of the bathroom where someone can help you get in, and then you can take as long as you want and get out on your own. And a lot of times in the bathroom, it's very tiny, but outside is this hallway and there is more room to do that. It's easier for a person to get in even on their own. That's something that people don't think about, but that's just hinging the door in a certain direction that would make it easier if you can't do these other things. Um, and then there's also, like we talked about, there are things that are temporary solutions that maybe if you have, let's say, 3 or 4 rental properties, that if someone's coming to your property, you could say, hey, if you give us advance notice, here are some, additional things we could have in the home for you. There are basically handlebars you can put on either side of the toilet that allow people to get up and down. And here's the thing, you don't have to be in a wheelchair. Like you can have arthritis. You can have congestive heart failure and have a really weak heart and not have that strength to get up and down without those handles. That can be, and it's not anything permanent or damaging. You don't have to get a handyman to do it. There's also a raised bidets, which are maybe like 4 inches higher. So you don't even have to put in a raised toilet, right? So there's the standard 14-inch, and then there's 17 or 19-inch toilets. And those raised toilets make a big difference. And if you don't have that, here's a handy way that, oh, by the way, it washes you underneath so you don't have to get up, clean, get up, clean, get up. And it can be quite exhausting. I know, other people who've had disabilities that's what they have said. But you get a bidet and they're like, oh my God. And you have the handlebars you can get up. I mean, that right there just makes your whole day easier. And you can have shower benches that actually straddle the whole shower. And then they have a back and they have handlebars on the side. So when you have balance issues, you can get from your wheelchair in and then out. And for people, there's other people that aren't in wheelchairs who have balance issues, that if they were to sit down and do that, it would just be safer for them. And that's not something, again, that you would have to have a rolling shower and spend, $12,000 to remodel your house. It's an additional option for you. Those are some cheaper things you can do.
I
And
I think a lot of people have balance issues, like, as you get older in life also, like, 50, 60-year-old people, 70-year-old people, balance is a challenge, like, I'm getting older too, like, I don't necessarily have balance challenge to my understanding, but I certainly grab onto railings when I'm coming down staircases, because it's there and I don't wanna slip. I actually have fallen down a couple steps before, like, when I was younger and landed on my ankle, and that put me out for a while, like, that was not comfortable. So these are interesting points that we probably aren't even thinking about when we're deciding what the color scheme should be or what accent wallpaper to put up. Um, Let me ask about the size of what's required, right? You mentioned the door frames 32, 36 inches. Rory and I have looked at properties for my parents before, and we're bringing tape measures, right? For the walkway, for the, to get around a light post. I look to we're maybe trying to see if my parents will move up where we live. That's a struggle. That's a whole podcast right there. But we've looked at some properties and I'm trying to remove the objections that my father would have, right? And I know that the doorways is one of the objections. And he's really good at seeing, hey, we're gonna go out for dinner. Do they have a way for me to get in with my wife into the restaurant? Is there somewhere for her to sit when she gets in? Is there a curb cut when we park there? What does the handicap parking spot look like? When the ramp comes out of the wheelchair, where is it going to go, onto the curb or onto the ground or anything? Like, these are things that, like, I know because they think of all the time. But I think about everything you've said, Mrs. Schneider, and I think about the upgrades or improvements that a homeowner could make. It doesn't sound like they would have to make them on all the property bathrooms, right? Like, if they have 4 bathrooms in the property, this is something that maybe they could pick the largest bathroom and do it there, or the one
yeah,
on the main level, right? Like, this shouldn't sound extremely overwhelming if somebody's looking to appoint their property. Like, when you come to a short-term rental that maybe has a number of different bedrooms and bathrooms, like, would you be upset if they all didn't have this configuration, or were you just looking for one to have the configuration?
I think for most people, obviously, not going up steps, I think that's stupid. I've actually seen pictures. So there's like 3 steps and then it's this handicap bathroom. You're like, it's just doesn't make any sense. So yeah, on the main floor where there isn't any steps, to at least have access to one bathroom that people can use, right? And if you have the disability, whether that's a kid or not, they're probably going to be in the attached bedroom. Um, and so those are those things that you can do. And again, ideally, a roll-in shower is great. It is, okay? But if you can't have that, there are accessories and things you can do to kind of move around that. But I would say, if you're gonna put in towel bars, don't put in towel bars, put in grab bars that dual as towel racks, right? And I mean, if you're gonna make that change anyways, it's not that much more. Um, and that allows you to get some things done.
Rory and I just put a grab bar in a rear staircase. That would be a grab bar, right, Rory? What you installed?
That was a grab bar. I mean, uh, that was a uniquely difficult, second egress for that property, and we need that for everybody. So I don't think it's the best example of
But
a
the physical thing that we installed, like, that's the grab
yeah,
bar that Mr. Schneider's talking about, yeah.
it was a grab bar, yes.
Yeah. And yeah, they do double as towel racks. I mean, like, if you put it in there and if someone's and, we've heard that people want places to hang their towels, like, that you can't have enough hooks in these properties if you have a larger short-term rental. But, the grab bars, they come in a number of different finishes. Like, we've seen them on the walls and yeah, you could certainly hang your towel there if you're not in a wheelchair, right?
Yeah.
It's not like it's going to look bad.
No, ours look very nice. So we have chrome inside the shower, and we've got 2, and then outside the shower, we have 2. One right next to the shower, and one is, right like, as you wheel straight into the bathroom, right underneath the windows, the grab bar, you get the grab bar, and then he can transfer onto the toilet.
Are those hard to install through tile, like in the shower?
I think that depends on the property, right? I mean, the big thing is, do you have 2x4s or something behind it to brace it? And if it doesn't, you have to put a 2x4 in between, right? Your brackets in the wall, right? Your studs. That would be the big thing, right? Because this is something that's going to be able to pull someone up.
Yeah. And I'm thinking about the size of a bathroom too. A consideration is turning a wheelchair around if somebody is in a wheelchair.
Yeah.
I think of, Rory, the cruise that we took with my mother and my parents, my whole family for her 70th birthday. They stayed in the room next to ours. When we used a travel agency, BJ's Wholesale Club. They have a travel agency. We're members of them. It's like Costco. And we couldn't get the right information from the cruise line about which rooms were handicap accessible and which cruise voyages actually had that cabin available. Somehow BJ's was able to do this. And we literally said to BJ's, like, if you could tell us which of these 8 voyages the room is available, then we'll book it knowing that information. Like, we needed the room, and then we make the plans around it. So they figured it out. We picked the dates of the voyage as a result. They had the room next to ours. And it was a bit of a joke because cruise cabins are always so small. But Rory, when we went in that cabin, what kind of room did they have?
I mean, it was spacious, and I'll actually give the cruise line credit in that the situation. It was pretty well thought through. The bathroom opened up in a very large door to the main room. There's plenty of space to turn around. And they could probably attest better to the individual functions, but there was some thought that went into that particular room.
Yeah, and despite the fact that we could have held like a dance party for about 12 people in the room, which is uncommon for a cruise cabin. You needed the space because my mother needed to turn around in the wheelchair, but she was able to go out onto the patio. Like
That's a big
she's
deal. A lot of
yeah,
places don't. There's a big step down and you can't use it.
they had a little ramp up and down, like, where you kind of go over a door frame, a sliding door. So she was able to sit out there when we were in port or if we were cruising. This is Norwegian Cruises, by the way. So, give them some credit. And their bathroom definitely had, a lot of space to it. I think you wheel into the shower. It had everything you needed, right? Um, Not every configuration of an Airbnb would have something like that. So this is not something that if your property is small, you might not be able to go above and beyond to this level. There could be some considerations that you put into the property for people that maybe are using a walker or that have the balance issues. It doesn't the intention could be as good, you could be as kind-hearted as you wanna be and try to put in all these things, but maybe the configuration still doesn't work for someone in a wheelchair, but it could work for somebody else that is still hobbling around. I mean, I know that when Rory and I built the house that we built up in at the lake, we put a ramp in just in case my mother wants to visit, is kind of my thinking, right? They haven't come up there yet. We put the ramp in there. It does have one step into the living room. We don't claim that it is handicap accessible. However, I've had people that have stayed there that are coming in wheelchairs or have mobility issues that they're able to work with that. Maybe their family members able to help the wheelchair get up that one step, or maybe we could use the ramp that your father built to ramp up into there. And then and then some people just need that extra to get inside the place. And then they could navigate around themselves, the kitchen, the bathroom, the ensuite, everything. It's all on that main level. And it allowed them to be able to stay there with their 10 family members that were able to walk up and down the stairs. It's not a perfect configuration, and we don't claim that it is
Right.
handicap accessible, but we did have a little bit of thinking in there by putting a ramp from the parking area that gets at least to a situation where there's only one step up. Um, so we thought it was a happy medium for some people. Like, it doesn't work for everybody, but we don't claim that it is.
I think you can call something handicap friendly, right? And then have, again, in some of these cases, you can change things up. We were talking about wheelchairs, but like we talked before the show, something like 58 million people right now are over the age of 60, and in the next 20 years, it's going to be 82 million, right? And 2 years ago, 70 million people in America claimed they had some kind of disability, right? But that's not necessarily a wheelchair. And so, having levers on faucets and having levers on doors instead of knobs. Do you know people have arthritis? that just makes their life a little nicer. These kind of things, people trying to get up and off from a toilet, that is very, very hard for a lot of people who are in a wheelchair. And, to seriously that raised bidet and the handlebars and stuff, I got a paper, right? So it's got all this stuff in there. But if you were just to have that as an option and you don't have to have it in there permanently, they say, hey, do you want this? Do you need this? And you can have that there for them. Oh my God. That makes like the nicest, it is a big deal for a lot of people, and then not necessarily in a wheelchair. So I think we've been focusing on that, but having things like, and we got them cheap for my daughter. She wanted to make a little pond in the back a long time ago, and you can just put in their solar powered lights and have them around, let's say, the ramp that comes in. A lot of people have visibility issues. And again, as we have, between 58 million right now and 82 million by, in 20 years that are over the age of 60, you have vision issues. And I was listening somewhere where, when you're younger, it can take, just seconds, less than 30 seconds for you to adjust to dark and look bright areas. And as you get older, that number might be something like 15 minutes. So having more visibility, these are things that a lot of people I don't think are thinking of, right? But there are small things that was cheap. You can get those, I think, at the dollar store sometimes and put those in. It's just something that, little small things can make a big difference in your property. And again, you can say it's handicap friendly and have options for things that you don't have to have big installations or put a ton of money into that would really make a difference for people on their vacation.
Well, I think I should say, the term handicap friendly, which is interesting that you say that. I have had people ask lots of questions about the configuration of properties, right? There is something that can be done about adding a floor plan to a short-term rental property that might answer some of the questions. But when we get questions from people that I could tell there is some type of challenge for some of the guests, and we only know it if people are going to say this stuff, right? But if they say it, as a host, I try to over communicate because I'd rather there not be a surprise when they show up. I've I don't have floor plans at all of our properties, but I've had some people say, "Hey, my 90-year-old mother is gonna be traveling with us. Um, is I'm curious about the configuration of the downstairs bedroom," right? So, this is at our property up in Guilford, New Hampshire. I would say, "Hey, the bedroom has a king bed and 2 twins. The king's a little bit higher than the twin beds. There is a stand-up shower down there. Theoretically, somebody could enter the lower level of the property, from the ground level. They would just need somebody to go inside first to open the door." Right? So if they're traveling with a child or something, that might not be a big deal. They might be able to just walk up the stairs, up into the main level, which is up a set of stairs, have that person go down the stairs and then open the door so the person that has the mobility issues can then take up one step up and go right in there. And then I would say, hey, listen, at this property, to get to the kitchen, it's going to be a standard staircase of 12 steps, whatever it is, to get into the kitchen. So if that configuration works, we'd love to have you. If it doesn't, we understand. And,
Right.
we think it's worth you knowing this stuff in advance because we wouldn't want them to show up, realize the kitchen's on a different level,
Right.
and then they're sad or upset or angry that they have to bring food downstairs for mom and that she's not able to get up there and enjoy dinner with them. But living with, or we don't live with my parents, but no, having parents that have these disabilities, I understand that it's oftentimes their choice to make. And I know the life that my father and mother live and the struggles that they have, where let's say they were going to stay at that property, it might be okay for them if they have somewhere to stay with their family. The family's upstairs and someone brings dinner downstairs. My parents, that might be okay for them. Other parents, it might not be okay for them. But I'd rather give the information as a host and let the person that's booking make that decision.
Absolutely.
So, you know, I'm not my job as a host is not to sell the property as to how it might work for a family that has special needs when they're coming in. My job is to explain to the best of my ability, over explain what I see at the property, what I know about the property, some things that they might consider a challenge, and then let them decide because they might say, you know what, I can't find anywhere else that this would work out. Your property is beautiful. I think it'll be fine for the weekend that we're going to stay together. Right. Rory, let's ask a couple, before as we start to wrap up. I do want to talk about Mrs. Schneider's product, that she's been working on. But I also want to ask about legal issues, with this. There might be some things that hosts are concerned about, with offering a property that is, handicap accessible or has accessibility, but then it turns out that it's not. What do you think hosts should think through before they make those claims, or what are some other considerations on the law side? You need to turn your microphone on.
There are a couple different ways to approach that question. One is liability. So if you, but that largely results from either you being kind of negligent in how you handle the property and take care of the property, but also how you set expectations. So if you are not over communicative and somebody arrives at the property and it's difficult to get in or it's an accident waiting to happen, that's where there's liability for you. You're not necessarily liable just because an accident happens, but if there is negligence that somebody can point to, and that can be in your communication, there's an issue there. But then there's also the issue of unfair practices. If you just categorically excluded people who were who had needs in the property, you can't. It's not housing per se to when somebody's coming into a property, so the same standard doesn't apply. But if you just think you're going to be safe by turning everybody away, that's also an opening for liability there.
Um, Mrs. Schneider, I should have mentioned that Rory is a real estate attorney, so that's why I threw a legal question at
Yep,
He's
yep.
not just
Yeah, I figured when, yeah.
right. That's just espousing it.
But, despite the legal standards and everything that's out there, the real, kind of the question I have is, what are the expectations, that a traveler like you who's coming, with somebody who has, mobility issues, what are your expectations, for the property? I mean, right now we're recording this in the dead of winter when everything is icy and cold and potentially dangerous to anybody.
Yeah.
With things like that, what are your expectations? What are some of the things that you're willing to forgive and be patient with the host? And what are some things that are just absolutely unacceptable if a host does or doesn't do?
Well, I mean, I think when we were going to that camping area and they were claiming that was handicap accessible and there was no, like, sidewalk to get to that area, and you had to go through sand, and there's it was like 2 or 3-inch step up between, yes, it was a ramped porch to get onto the porch, but then getting into the actual cabin was not handicap friendly, and there was no bathroom there. And to get to there, you actually there was 2 different places I went to that were like that, that said that they were accessible. One, you actually had to go up a dirt hill to get to the bathroom from where we're at, and the other one was, it was sand for part of the way, and then it was sidewalk the other part of the way, and then once the bathroom we were there, it was accessible, but that's not, um just don't say that. Don't say it's handicap accessible at that point because, um, I would have tried to work to go somewhere else that was. Um, I think, some of these places had yes, the roll-in shower was really nice up at Mackinac. It was beautiful. But if just people had a shower bench where, right, the transitions over it, that would allow us to be able to use bathrooms versus, okay, it's a standard, like you think tub shower, right? If you don't have any benches, then how is he supposed to take a shower? How is he supposed to we can't, right? So just I would go with what Jason said. Say what it is. I mean, if you're just honest with what's there and what isn't, I think that's a big, huge deal. Because if it isn't, then you can move on to somewhere else, right? And to claim it's handicap friendly, if you are doing the things like putting the levers on and changing the hinges out or having, pocket doors, something that's easy for people to get in and out of, and lighting, right, for visibility and ramps. And just understand, just like he was talking about, going out on that cruise ship, going onto the porch. A lot of places, yes, you can get into the facility, but then you cannot use anything outside of it because there's step ups that are 2 or 3 inches. And so when you're alone, because part of the time you're going to be doing stuff, um, he couldn't access any of that, right? So you can make that so you are rollouts and that you can use it. And I'm just saying, if you're going to be remodeling anyways, there's a few things that, honest to God, I mean, putting in a lever versus a knob, it is the exact same amount of money, right? Putting in some grab bars versus putting in some towel racks, right? Because the grab bars can be towel racks too. It's a nominal difference. If you're going to put in a toilet, put in a 19-inch toilet versus a 14-inch toilet. It really does make a big difference. It's a nominal cost. Having a countertop that could actually come up and you could go underneath it with a wheelchair. That would be really nice to be able to eat with somebody when you're on vacation. These kind of things. So, like I said, I have a paper. It has everything in there. You can choose what you want, what you don't. There's cheaper options. There's a little nicer, more expensive options. Pick something. But I think at the end of the day, like I said, I was talking to a gentleman. He's had MS for longer than my husband. My husband's had it for 20 years. And he was just like, it took us forever to find an apartment that was accessible, with our issues. And it's a niche that isn't being filled, right?
Yeah.
So I just think that this is, and again, it's one that you're going to catch at the wave. Because right now, again, like 58 million people, and we're going to 82 in the next 20 years. And that number is going to get higher. There's a big need.
And just to underscore that with my final question, when you go to travel, just how difficult is it to find a suitable house where everybody in your party will feel included?
I really never found a camping place that was like they just that there isn't a lot of places that are really accessible that way. And when you have little kids, it kind of sucks because that's something they want to go catch frogs and go fishing and that kind of thing. I think there's more, motels and stuff are more accessible, and that's a doable thing. I think your Airbnbs, I think that's nicer if you could be on the water, if you could have more people there. Um, but we never tried doing that because it's just, again, the accessibility things. We've talked to a couple other people. We were young, right? So my husband, really had to, when we were leaving and going any place like, say, like a water park, he was like 30 and we had to have a wheelchair, right?
Yeah.
And most people at that age aren't doing that. And so it's hard to,
Yeah.
I think I think as you age, if you have more people around you who are going through the same difficulties, you can kind of learn from one another. But for us, it was just, kind of hit or miss to find places that were actually accessible versus ones that said they were and weren't.
Yeah. We know MS affects everybody differently. And we didn't even talk about temperature, but I could certainly throw in there that, growing up my entire life, my house was frigid because my mother was always so hot. She ran hot. And now we go visit the same exact house. They've been in there for 50 something years and it's always sweltering because now she's always cold. And that's just pretty common with, MS. And there's other people that have sensitivity to temperature. So, that's where we open the conversation. But, thinking about the temperature of your house and throughout your house is another consideration for people that have disabilities that affects, how they're running. I do want to start to wrap up, but I want to ask a little bit about the movable wheelchair tray that you're working on with less barriers. And I also want to make sure that you send us a link to that paper you're working on so we can put that in the show notes. But tell us about the tray and then we'll wrap things up.
So, my husband, he went from a walker to a wheelchair. He had a tray with a walker, get his own food, do his own thing. And he went to a wheelchair. And so we did what everyone does. You just buy what's available. And there's really two things. There's one that has knobs. You put it on the wheelchair. It kind of just stays there. It's considered a restraint. And the other is a flip arm. And we use the standard tray. And he went to try to get things out of a refrigerator, things out of a microwave. And it was just too far over the distance between him and where he was trying to go to be able to use it. So you'd actually have to physically take it off. Well, if it's taken off, you can't use it. He wasn't able to do any of that. Try getting a hot bowl of soup from a microwave to a table, and you have to wheel, and it's just you. I mean, that's I think a lot of people go for the elderly. That's a great, quick meal for them. But that's not so much the case if you're in a wheelchair. And when he would, let's say I would set him up, he'd have his food, he'd be eating. All of a sudden you got to go, and you got to go right now. And what he would have to do is go to a table, take everything off, take the tray off, and then you have to go into the bathroom, grab your grab bar. It's a big thing. And if you have incontinence issues, those extra couple minutes, then you end up having another 45-minute problem, right? And so at that point, we just threw it out. And so it took us 2 years, but we have, it's for manual wheelchairs. It's a clamp that goes on very low profile and has a hole, and then it's a block and tray system. And so it actually slides out of the way And then you can actually, without knobs and like 3 or 4 different ways, pick it up and you can rotate it 90 degrees. So it's a sliding side tray, or you can do 90 degrees towards you. And that's how he eats. He actually has a tray right up to his stomach so that food doesn't go in his lap, and has a pocket system and a cup system. So you can put like your pills. He does all his pills in there, or his stand-up silverware, or your iPads, cell phones, that kind of things. So he can go do it. We actually use it as a side tray when we go to the couch. So I'll transfer him on the couch, and then you can pull the tray right out over the couch, and he can put like his popcorn and his drink there and drink it off from there. So, but it took us 2 years to develop that. It's plastic injection molded, and it's
Yeah.
so
Well, best of luck with selling that product to people that clearly need it. And it's interesting that you found a need for something based on what was in your household, and you found a way to get that created. So, one of the things that people that have disabilities would love to have is as much independence as possible, and to live, a life without needing to ask people for things left and right. And it's tough. It's really difficult. I see how my father and mother, um, live, and I can only imagine like how you helping your husband around. So, tools like that just help everybody out. It helps the mental state of people that have disabilities, that they don't always have to ask for things. It gives some relief to people that do care for them, and it allows people to be independent, which is what we all want.
I just want to say one other thing, just because your mother has MS and mine has MS. I do have another digital paper, and I'm just going to bring this up just because I don't see it put out there. I actually asked Tim Coetzee, I think is his name. He's the president of National MS Society. Said Happy New Year on LinkedIn, and it's like, why don't they put out the leading cause of MS they now have in research is Epstein-Barr virus, and I have a medical lab science degree, so and what they give you at the lab is accurate, but those normal ranges aren't based on a healthy subset of the population, and they're not a standard of care. So they change over time and location. And if a lot of people in your area are sick, that's a sick range. And why don't they have these couple tests that you can do? And if you have this, you can quantify it. And then there's actually different medications, some of which are not classified as antivirals, but in research have been found. They actually know the mechanism of action, the MOA, which is huge with the doctor, and actually apply that. In over a year, can you reduce the damaging antibodies? Why aren't they putting that out now? And he said that they are doing clinical trials right now. They want more information. The issue is that a lot of times that those clinical trials can take 5 to 8 years, and it's between 15 to 17 years after that's published that it's actually used in patients' offices. And I'm just putting this out to people who may have MS. I really feel like this is something you take the paper, you print it off with the couple pages of references. That's very important to your doctor, because when they're seeing neurology and blood and cell and molecular biology, this is not .com information. This is legitimate stuff that they don't risk their license for, that you could go through and see if this applies to you, and if it does, do something about it. I'm just saying, because MS, it's a degenerative disease, and in that amount of time, there's a lot more damage. And if you know that the research is saying this could be a part of your problem, just feel like we need to get that out.
Try to curtail it, before it gets as bad as it gets. And, I remember my mother walking and running and playing with us. And, I saw the whole degeneration into a cane and a walker, and then falling, and then a manual wheelchair, and then an electric wheelchair. Like, if there's ways to combat that, especially for people with MS who get diagnosed young, which most people get diagnosed relatively young in their lives. I have friends that have it too. It's, you can help them live a as close to normal life as possible. So send that link over to us also, and we'd be happy to put that in the show notes of this. And we'll make sure we put in your contact information so people who are listening to this can reach out to you if they have any questions. I'd like to thank you for being part of Smart Stay Show. This has been a terrific conversation that we've not had just yet. So thank you for being our resident expert on helping appoint properties for people that have disabilities. Rory, thank you once again for all your insights. Where can people find you, Rory?
You can find me at my law practice, STR Legal. That's str.legal.
All right. And if you'd like to be a guest on the podcast, just like Mrs. Schneider did, you can go to smartstateshow.com and reach out to us. Fill out our lead form, and we will have a conversation with you if we think it would be a great topic to bring to our audience. We love 5-star reviews, and we love it if you could subscribe and like all of our stuff that you see on social. So thank you so much for listening. Thank you, Mrs. Schneider. Thank you, Rory, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you.